Howdy everyone, Poacher here with an Age of Magic video, and in today's video we're going to be doing the Hero Spotlight for Teodor, the melee damager for the newest faction coming to the game, the Cloud Wanderers. In this video we'll go over his stats, his abilities, have a little bit of a look at him in the arena. Unfortunately, because he is the first character to be released for the faction and we do not have access to the others, it's going to be hard to get a grasp on him and how useful he is in a team setting. So we'll just talk about how you can potentially use him or how the faction is potentially going to be played. And I can tell you right now, it does seem very interesting. We're going to be introduced to a new skill called the flying skill. We'll go over that in this video. And yeah, let's get into it. Straight up, you will notice though that he has a massive hit point pool of 13.2 million, one of the highest in the game, especially considering that he is not a boss. He is just very tanky, and Playcourt have told me already that the faction is just going to be naturally tanky, so keep that in mind. His speed is massive as well at 256, armor 419k, magic damage resistance 417k, basic damage 811k, critical hit chance 25%, but it's not super important. You'll understand that when we go over his abilities, and critical damage is 1.4, just shy of 1.5 million. So fairly decent damage as well. And here are his other stats. Feel free to stop and have a look at anything you wish to. That information is there to use for however you see fit. So we'll jump into the arena now. We'll go over his abilities, have a look at his animations, and talk about how this character can potentially be used. Moving into the arena, we have Teodor's basic attack, Lightning Strike, triggers the melee damage at class mark, attacks the target 2 times in a row, has a 20% chance per light ally to place 3 charges of static on the target. At the start of a turn, the target of static and 2 random enemies receive damage equal to 35% of Teodor's basic damage. 1 stack is removed each turn. When more than 9 charges of static are accumulated, the charges explode and disappear, dealing damage per charge. If there are static charges on the target at the start of the attack, there is a 70% chance of 6 charges blowing up. So a fairly decent basic attack. We're going to go ahead and look at the animation on the enemy Bjorn. You will see though that even though it applies 3 charges, the 2 strikes can apply 6 charges. So we'll have a look. 1, 2, there we go. So 6 charges applied. So pretty decent in terms of application of the charge debuff. Other things to note in this as well is that the charges work the same way as Teonor's. Static applied when it's that character's turn, he will take damage along with 2 random allies of the enemy. Now, what you need to note, and this is covered in the passive as well, is that if Teodor is on the team, Teodor cannot apply the static charges. Teonor's will override his. The reason for that is because they act differently in the sense that Teonor's can stack up to 20, where his can only stack up to 9. So his will get overridden by Teonor's. However, with some of his other abilities, he does benefit from the static charge being applied, and in that sense, he will still work with Teodor. So it's important to keep that in mind. Other than that, it's a pretty decent basic attack, especially because both strikes apply the static, and when the static does trigger, we can have a look right now actually. When we trigger the static, it does a fair amount of damage. Nearly takes out the Bjorn there. That's because it was also accompanied by the basic attack itself, but yeah, pretty decent damage. Overall, nice and simple, pretty straightforward, can do decent damage. All good in my books. Moving into Teodor's second ability, Solar Storm, triggers the melee damage at class mark, deals damage to all enemies, has a 20% chance per light ally to place 3 charges of static on the target. If there are static charges on the target at the start of the attack, the target takes extra damage equal to 100% of Teodor's basic damage. So we're going to go ahead and use the ability, have a look at the animations. Puts out his kite, fires across and does damage. Okay, it's pretty cool. All right, we're going to run back to him, and now we'll have a look at the damage now that static has been applied to the enemy. So he'll again dash over and, okay, pretty significant, decent amount of damage, good application of static. And now, this is what we mean by having a Teodor on the team, for example. With Teodor on the team, he would not be able to apply the static to the enemy. However, he would still benefit from the extra damage equal to 100% of his basic attack, as they would still have the static from Teodor applied. He himself would just not be able to apply the static. Again, we'll go over that in his passive though. Other than that, pretty simple ability, pretty straightforward, nothing fancy about it. Just does decent damage, applies static, and does more damage if static is already applied to the enemy. Moving on to Teodor's third ability, Riding the Lightning. It triggers the melee damage at class mark, and it has the new addition of Flying Skill. Flying Skill works in the sense that with other Cloud Wanderers on the team, they all benefit from the Flying Skill. So for Teodor, for example, his Flying Skill allows him to do additional support attacks for decent amount of damage. So going over the ability itself, deals high magic damage to the target and 2 extra random targets. Casts 3 charges of static on each target. If the target already has static charges, it misses 1 turn. So that also counts for the 2 random targets it hits as well. It's a pretty decent ability. We'll go ahead and look at the animation. So he'll again charge up his kite. It's pretty cool. I really like his animations. There we go. 3 charges applied to Bjorn, Pride, and Tricky. Now, if they already had static, he would stun all of them. It's only a 1 turn stun, but again, still beneficial to your team, especially when you can stun a primary target. The other 2 are just beneficial. So that's always good. And the Flying Skill, as I said, it allows him to do support attacks, but that will be mentioned in his passive. So decent crowd control, decent damage. Again, the bread and butter of this character is his passive. Once we get there, you understand, but decent damage, again, because of his passive. So we'll move on to his passive now, and then we'll tie everything together. It will make more sense. Moving on to the bread and butter of the character, his passive, Stormline. If there is at least 1 dark character among the allies, Teodor doesn't cast static. So that's what I meant before when saying if Teodor is on the field, Teodor cannot cast static on the enemies. However, his abilities can still do those extra effects when attacking characters with static applied, which Teodor can still do. So though he can't apply static, he still benefits from characters that can apply static if they are a dark hero. At the beginning of the round, Teodor gets 6 effects, increasing the chance of dealing critical damage up to 100%. 1 effect is spent each time he deals critical damage. Effects cannot be removed before they end. So he's getting 6 strikes of guaranteed critical damage, which is huge. He will do tremendous damage with this. And in the last part, each time another ally uses a flying skill, Teodor deals magic damage to a random enemy. This damage is increased by 60% for each stack of static on the target. So very interesting passive, offers him a lot. Things to note. Number 1, the most important thing is his high damage. He will be able to perform high damage because he's guaranteed 6 critical strikes. Now, in saying that, I assume, not tested, impossible to test, but I assume that his support attacks from flying skills will count as critical strikes. So if you're trying to save him for his abilities, he may use them before his chance to get his 2nd or 3rd ability even comes around. So good possibility of high impact damage very early on in the fight. Now, the extra damage he is able to supply through the static charges. Also remember, he has very, very high speed. So I'm assuming that in battle, he will be performing as one of the first characters. He can do his AoE, apply static. When an ally Cloud Wanderer is able to use a flying skill, he will then come through with his support attack and do 60% extra damage for each stack of static. So at a minimum, he's able to apply 3 stacks. You could get an extra 180% damage from his support attack. So also remember that early in the fight, he will also have his 6 effects. So he will get a guaranteed critical strike with that support attack on top of the 180% extra damage. If I'm doing my maths right, I could not be. I'm not great at maths, but I think that all makes sense. So yeah, very high chance of this character just being an absolute damage machine. Also take into consideration though characters that can add defensive capabilities to their allies. Liongo, for example, if he uses his taunt, he will apply defense, which would mitigate a lot of Teodor's damage. But there is still the potential for a lot of damage. So a very, very interesting character. Cannot wait to see the other Cloud Wanderers and how they work together, because by the way Teodor is designed, it seems like they will all be working off each other, especially with the flying skill. So yeah, there you go. That is the first Cloud Wanderer to the game. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below. I will answer it to the best of my ability wherever you're around the world. Until next time, please take care of yourself.